Okay, in today's video, we're going to be testing a Rotex 150 EQ sander for removing old paint and sanding down metal. Now, just to check so I didn't break the tool, I did actually do a little bit of research first. Even though I've done this once or twice before, I wanted to verify. And from their website, it does say Rotex sanders are designed for dry sanding and polishing of wood, plastic, metal, composite materials, paint, varnish, filler, and similar materials. Running full dust extraction is really the goal here. I'm pretty tired of using harsh chemicals to strip paint. I don't have access to a sandblaster, although that would be ideal. And I really don't love using a grinder with a flap disc just because it absolutely destroys my shop and makes a really big mess. Not to mention, the further I get along in my career, the more almost paranoid about particulates in the air and entering my body I have become. My first impression is using a 40 grit paper on grind mode, it's really doing quick work getting this old oil-based paint off. I assume it's oil-based, it could be rattle can. It does have a primer underneath, that's the pink spot that you see. And what's really nice is I was getting good use out of the pads. I had a lot of material to sand here. On this project, we're going to be welding these pre-built bases. We're kind of retrofitting them to make a larger case section and a larger shelf. You can see there's holes in it from where it was bolted together. We're simply going to weld them together for the client. And I did not want to use a stripper, and we did not have time to hire a sandblaster. That also might not be in the budget of the job, so this is a great option if you already own a tool similar to the Rotex. Now, I'm a big fan of Festool, but I've also used the Makita grinder sander, and I know Bosch has one. I think the important thing here from a random orbital standpoint is that it has a grind mode, something more aggressive that's not going to bog out or stop its rotation while you're sanding. This is real time, and it just shows how quickly it really blasts through the paint, and it's moving the metal. I could have clamped it down, but I was moving so quickly I just kind of wanted to position it against my hip on the workbench. I locked my casters, and I even went ahead and hit the roundovers. Now, the areas I'm sanding specifically are going to be weld points plus 4 or 5 inches because I don't want to heat up the existing paint. I don't want it to burn and then off gas and smoke in the shop, nor do I want to have to deal with bubbled or blistered paint. So I would just opted in for the sander, and to my surprise, it worked incredibly well. Now, a sander is not going to fix improper welding or fill areas that need filling, but whoever welded these bases originally did a pretty good job for the purpose that they serve. And in all honesty, the Rotex really did a great job of getting down to bare metal relatively pain-free pretty quickly and a lot more clean than I had even expected. Now, there was particulate that came off, and anytime you're sanding off paint on such a thin surface, meaning 1 inch or so, the dust extraction is not going to be able to pick up everything. Flashing back to a video I did before using some old kind of shop metal to build a little farm table, this method also works really well for getting rid of surface dust and rust, maybe even a little bit of pitting. And as you see here, I have actually used it to polish out welds on some large benches as opposed to using this grinder, which, as you can see, really takes a toll on your shop and eventually, if you're not careful, your body as well. So the Festool Rotex 150 EQ or any grind mode sander worth its weight versus sanding off old paint finish. Is it worth it? In my opinion, absolutely yes. Huge advantages for me. You know, the ergonomics of being used to that tool. My body's kind of conditioned to using the Rotex, so it's not like an kind of extenuous strain on joints that haven't been used in a while. Dust extraction, obviously a huge key here. Finesse, it doesn't dish anywhere near as quickly as when you're using a grinder and a flap disc. Face protection, not as risky as using a grinder and a flap disc. Even though a cutoff wheel is far more dangerous than a flap disc, they can still catch you. Parts can fly off, or you can get them bound up in your clothing. If this sander catches you, it might rub a little skin raw, but it's not going to do as much damage as quickly as a grinder and a flap disc will. The other thing here is that it's less sanding the metal and more polishing it and just really removing what needs to be removed, which in this case is old paint, or maybe it's clear coat on a finish. I have not tested this method on powder coating, although I would assume it would be very similar, potentially even easier because it would be less gummy than an oil-based or lacquer-based paint, meaning maybe I get a longer life out of my sanding pad. So downsides to it, it is not as aggressive as a grinder with a flap disc. It does require owning a sander with a locking grind mode function, which can get expensive, and ideally you're running it on proper dust collection. All that being said, there's still a mess to clean up, and I was definitely wearing my respirator during the entire process, but it was far superior, in my opinion, to using chemicals to remove this paint. Ideally, in a dream world, I would have hired out someone to sandblast this stuff off and dropped it off, picked it up a few days later, and it would have been absolutely perfect. But the advantage here too is that I can control my surface area. So if there are any imperfections in the weld, I can at least gain clear vision to them, repair them if needed, and sand down any burrs that might be there, hopefully with just the use of the Rotex. If not, implement something more powerful like a grinder. If you guys have any questions on this video, feel free to let me know in the comments. If you like what you're seeing, give us a thumbs up. And if you really like it, subscribe. See you on the next one.